Welcome to the Training for Translators podcast.
Do better work, earn more money, and enjoy your job with our weekly episodes for ambitious freelance translators and interpreters.
Visit our website at trainingfortranslators.com to subscribe to our newsletter, learn more about our upcoming classes, or read blog post versions of our podcast.
Now here's your host, Corinne McKay.
Greetings, listeners. This is Corinne McKay with episode 6 of the Training for Translators podcast on nudging dormant clients. And before we dive in, I just wanted to say thanks so much for all of the positive feedback on the podcast. Those of you who have emailed me, posted comments, reviewed the podcast online. And if you would like to do that, nudge, nudge, maybe you could pause this episode right now and leave a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This episode is loosely based on a post that appeared on the Training for Translators blog on February 24th, 2023. And if you would like to read that original post or leave a comment on this podcast episode, just go to trainingfortranslators.com, click the blog link, and everything you'd like to read is there. If you want the original post, use the search box and put in the word nudge. And if you want to leave a comment on the post for the podcast episode, just search for podcast episode 6. So here we go on nudging dormant clients. So what is, if you've never heard that term before, let's start at the beginning. That just means getting back in touch with clients that you haven't heard from in a while. And I'm going to talk about how, why, when to do that. But I have long maintained that nudging dormant clients is both the world's most boring marketing method and the world's most effective marketing method, at least for the things that we do. Now, every year when I teach my March Marketing Madness Challenge group, I believe this is the 5th or 6th year that I'm going to be doing it. And I, preach about the value of nudging dormant clients. The typical response from the participants in that group is like, that sounds irritating. And if people wanted to work with me, they know where to find me anyway. I'm not doing that. And I tell people, just can you humor me and do it once? I mean, this goes along with one of my other sort of core marketing mindset principles, which is when you have a client from whom you are getting no work, you literally have nothing to lose because you can't get less than 0 work, right? The hardest situation to manage is something that involves one of your anchor clients. Actually, that makes me think I should do an episode on anchor clients. But an anchor client being, in my definition, a client that provides 10% or more of your work volume or more than $10,000 or euros of income. That is a really tricky situation to manage when you want to, for example, raise your rates with one of your most important clients, because if you lose them, that could be a huge hit to your business. But I think all of us are sort of too anxious, overly anxious about, how we look to clients who are giving us no work. And the real point is, who cares? If the client is giving you no work right now, the situation literally can't get worse. And I say that as someone who is optimistic almost to a fault. So when I tell people in my March Marketing Madness Challenge group, look, if this client has dropped off your radar screen, dropped off the face of the earth, has not sent you any work in 4 months to 2 years, you honestly have nothing to lose. Humor me and nudge them. And I will say that even freelancers who do this in a situation where they perceive that the reason the client hasn't contacted them in a while is something to do with them, they still have success. Let me talk about that a little bit more. So what I mean here is when I have let's say a participant in March Marketing Madness who says, I'm really afraid to nudge this client because I think that I made a mistake on an assignment for them, or, they ask me for a quote for an assignment and I never got back to them. And now it's 6 months later and I tell them, go ahead and do it. The response is almost always positive. I know that sounds crazy, but I really mean this, based on, sort of anecdotal data, that the response is still almost always positive. So let's dig in a little more. I'm actually going to jump to the end of what I wrote in this blog post to talk about why we don't nudge dormant clients. Now, the real upside here is that a client you already worked with is so much easier to get back in touch with than a client that you never worked with before. Rather than starting from zero, like I'm a German to English translator specializing in patents, you're just going back to this client and saying something like, hey, in looking over my accounting records, I noticed that we haven't worked together since that really interesting project that I did for you 6 months ago. Obviously, you're going to say the details. I'm just wondering if there's something in the pipeline that I might be helpful with. We'll talk in a little bit about what to actually say. Now, what is the reason that we don't do that? I think normally 3 things. Most importantly, and first of all, we think it comes off as desperate. Right? We think it sounds sort of, pitiful to go crawling back. This is in our minds, right? To go crawling back to this client. Or sometimes we have a legitimate reason. Like I had a number of people in the March Marketing Madness group who said, there's this really promising client, but I'm actually kind of embarrassed to go back to them because here was one person's example. They contacted me about a project 6 months ago and I was on a completely off the grid vacation and it just completely fell off my radar screen and I never responded. So number one is that either we think it sounds desperate as if we have like no work, no clients, we're running out of money, or we are embarrassed about something we did in the past. Number two, we think that if clients needed us, they would contact us. They know where to find me if they need me. And number three, we worry about what to say. We worry that all there is to say is like, work over here is pretty slow. Do you have anything? So those, in my experience, are the 3 reasons that we don't nudge. Sorry. Yeah, we shouldn't judge either, but those are the reasons that we don't nudge. Here are my questions to you. How many times do you respond the absolute first time that someone contacts you? I think, and I'm a pretty responsive person, but in the past couple of weeks, I've gotten calls from service providers that I really needed to respond to. My dentist, it turned out they were going to be closed for vacation on a day when I had scheduled an appointment. And then our dishwasher broke. The excitement of home ownership. Her dishwasher broke. And I called the repair place to try to make an appointment and they had to call me back. And in both of those situations, I didn't respond the first time and they had to call me again. And I was actually really glad that they did because it saved me the effort of getting back in touch with them. They just called me and said, hey, we're calling from Columbine Appliance about your broken dishwasher. It's now fixed. Crisis averted. So I think the reality is people who work on the client side, whether for agencies or direct clients, are really busy just like the rest of us. And the reality is that most clients, even those at large agencies or large companies, send work to the first person who comes to mind. You want to be that person, be the person who comes to mind. Sidebar here, I had always theorized about the benefits of nudging and, seen the benefits of nudging in students of mine. But because I don't hire other translators or interpreters, I didn't really have any statistics on how well it works. And in about the past year, I've talked to 2 people who either have or had positions in which they were the ones giving work out to freelancers. One was a managing interpreter and one was a vendor manager at a translation agency. Here's what they told me, that they're, also sort of unscientific estimates, but based on, it's not like they went through and actually counted the assignments, but the point is they're looking at the data of how much work they sent out to all of their freelancers. Their estimate was that freelancers who nudged got 40 to 60% more work when compared to the freelancers who did not nudge. And I have to say that even as someone who has long taught and promoted this technique, I was pretty blown away by that statistic that we are not talking about an increase of 5% or 10% because you make an effort to keep in touch with your dormant clients. We're talking about an increase of perhaps more than half, that you're getting 50% more work than the freelancers who are not nudging. So I think now we've demonstrated the value of nudging. Let's take a break for a short message from Training for Translators, and then we'll come back and talk about how to actually do this. If you are a beginning freelancer looking for your very first clients, or if you're an experienced freelancer looking for your first direct clients, Training for Translators has a self-paced 4-week class for you. At our website, trainingfortranslators.com, click the Upcoming Classes tab to read more about getting started as a freelance translator or interpreter in the age of AI and direct client marketing launchpad. Welcome back to episode 6 of the Training for Translators podcast on nudging dormant clients. Now let's talk about how we actually do this. Number one, let's decide who we are going to nudge. I think the number one target for nudging is any client that effectively onboarded you, then never sent you any work. So it doesn't really matter if it's an agency or a direct client, but a client where they seemed really interested, but then they never sent you any work. Start there. And again, here is something where, in my experience, last year I had about 150 people in March Marketing Madness, so that's a pretty good representative sample. And I would say of the people who contacted this type of client, onboarded but never sent any work, that the vast majority of the time, the client thought they were waiting for something from the translator, and the translator thought they were waiting for something from the client. So the client would respond and say, right, we're actually eager to work with you, but you never returned your non-disclosure agreement. Okay, whoops. So start there. And here is the kind of wording I would use, something like, I'm just wondering if you need anything else from me to complete the process. If not, I'd love to get going on an assignment. So something really upbeat and simple, remind them where you are in the process. I filled out your online application for English to Japanese patent translation in April. In looking over my records, I see that I haven't heard from you since then, and I'm still eager to work with you. Then jump into that. I'm just wondering if you need something else from me to complete the process. Next would be clients who seemed happy with your work, but then they went silent. So when you have a client who the last thing you heard from them was, thanks for that wonderful translation, or, we really enjoyed working with you on that interpreting assignment, then you never heard from them again. Then I would use that wording of, I'm looking over my records and I see that we haven't worked together since. Then describe the last thing you did for them and say, I'd love to work with you again if the need arises, or I'd love to work with you again if you have anything in the pipeline that I might be helpful with. Third would be clients whose work you had to turn down, but now you have some availability coming up. I will say that I do this particularly with interpreting clients. One of the things that is challenging about interpreting that I can now say as someone who does both translation and interpreting is that with interpreting, you can only be in one place at a time. And I personally have a policy. I know that this is not shared by all interpreters, and that's fine. We all have to make our own policies. But I personally have a policy that once I accept an assignment from a client, I never, ever cancel because I got a better offer. So even if I have, let's say, a, minimum charge court assignment, which would be 2 hours, and I get offered a conference interpreting assignment for that day, I don't cancel the court assignment. So the point being, I end up turning down a fair bit of work because interpreting sort of goes in seasons, right? You have days that everybody wants you, and then you have days that are totally empty. So when I see in my calendar that I have some availability coming up, the first thing I do is go back to those clients whose work I turned down, and I say something like, Thank you so much for the work offers that you sent me last month. I wanted to let you know that I have some availability coming up in the next few weeks if you have anything in the pipeline. So I'm recording this on October 25th. I can actually, it's true for me that I can see that the week of American Thanksgiving, I actually don't have any interpreting assignments on the books for Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday because it's a very common week in the US for people to take the whole week off. So just yesterday, I contacted one of my legal interpreting clients and said, I'm so sorry that I've had to turn down the past few offers that you sent me. And I did want to let you know that for the week of Thanksgiving, I'm actually completely available Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And the advantage there is, I mean, you might be thinking if you're listening to this, well, what are the odds that they have work for that time period? And true, like that is a very slow kind of, week of no significant activity in the US. But the point being, I'm showing that I'm interested in a way that does not sound desperate or annoying, right? I'm just checking in and saying, really sorry I've had to turn you down so many times lately, but here are some days that I'm completely available if you have anything. Number 4, clients where your primary contact doesn't work there anymore. So this happens to all of us that we outlast the agency or direct client employee who was our main contact. Then you say something, you try to find a new person and say something like, I've worked with, X project manager or whatever their job title was, communications director, for the past few years. I know that they've moved on and I'm wondering who my new contact would be. So those are 4 situations in which I think you should nudge. Let's just go back over those. Number 1, and the most important, clients where you were moving through the onboarding process or you were actually onboarded, but then they never sent you any work. And that could be an agency or a direct client. When I was preparing for this episode, I actually realized I have a direct client in that category right now. I signed a contract with them and they haven't sent me any work. And that's been like 2 months. So I actually need to nudge them today. Number 2, clients who seemed really happy with your work and then they went silent. Number 3, clients who you had to turn down, but now you would be available if they needed you. And number 4, clients where the main person who you worked with has moved on, has a different job, or doesn't work there anymore. Now, honestly, I think that the easy part is what to say. I gave some scripts in that last section, and I think it is helpful to give a specific time window. So, for example, saying, I always start with something like, in looking over my records, I'm noticing that we haven't worked together since, and then describe the last project that you did for them. But I think it can be very helpful, instead of just saying like, got any work for me, to say something like, as of now, I'm completely available for the week of December 1st, if you have anything in the pipeline for those dates. And I think keep it brief, keep it upbeat. I honestly, and again, this is a personal thing, if you perceive that the, dormancy of this client is due to a mistake on your part, don't mention it. They'll either not respond or maybe they'll mention it or, anything like that. But I think you don't need to point out to them, like, I haven't heard from you since I missed that deadline, right? Either they'll remember or they won't. And for the record, from March Marketing Madness, I had a couple of participants in that group who went back to agencies where they did make a mistake. It was their fault, and still it ended up working out. So I think brief email reminding the dormant client of the last time you worked together, expressing your desire to work together in the future. You really enjoyed that project. You'd love to work with them again. And I think give a specific date or date range when you're going to be available. And just bonus tip to close out here, we are not quite there yet, but approaching a time of year when you can nudge pretty much any client by giving your holiday availability. So if the US has the advantage that we have Thanksgiving at the end of November, and then December, January, we have Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's. So you could start a little earlier in the US, but the point being that a holiday availability email is a good reason to nudge pretty much any client, because if you live in a country that celebrates, at least Christmas and New Year's, maybe Hanukkah as well, or if you just have winter holidays when a lot of people tend to take a lot of time off, that sending a holiday availability email can work with pretty much any client, saying, ahead of the winter holidays, I wanted to let you know what my availability is in case you have anything in the pipeline I might be helpful with. Okay, I think that is it. Go forth and nudge and let me know how it goes. This has been episode 6 of the Training for Translators podcast. The podcast is hosted by me, Corinne McKay. The intro and outro were created and recorded by Shadow Studio. The podcast is technologically hosted on Libsyn, recorded and edited in Audacity using a Shure MV7 Plus microphone. And our website is trainingfortranslators.com. You can go there to read more than 1,000 blog posts for free. Listen to the podcast right on the website. Subscribe in Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. And if there's anything that you'd like to ask me or tell me, just drop an email to classes@trainingfortranslators.com. I hope to talk to you in a future episode.
Thanks for listening to the Training for Translators podcast, helping you do better work, earn more money, and enjoy your job.
To leave a comment, learn more about our upcoming classes, or read blog post versions of our podcast, visit our website at trainingfortranslators.com.
If you enjoy the Training for Translators podcast, please tell your colleagues and friends about it and leave us a review in your favorite podcast app.